Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live. I've been fascinated by psychology and neuroscience ever since I studied negotiation skills and realized that reading body language was really important to the results that we got and whether people were telling us the truth or not. Caroline Williams, my guest tonight, is a science journalist who's written three books on neuroscience and traveled all over the world. She's a lifelong learner, like most of us are, and has done some incredible things. I'm delighted you've joined us today, Caroline. Thank you so much for doing that. And I've
Thank
just got a
you.
few slides to show to start off with, which explains where you're coming from. So hopefully up they come. So that's Caroline's book that I bought at Waterloo Station, having never heard of Caroline before, was fascinated by it, couldn't put it down, and connected with Caroline on LinkedIn. And Caroline and I met for coffee, and Caroline very kindly agreed to come on this show. Caroline was wired up in Kansas City onto a new piece of kit a few years ago. Caroline, I think you're very brave doing some of these extraordinary
Yeah, this
things.
was brain stimulation. Yeah, non-invasive brain stimulation to make me more creative. But I can talk about that later on. But that was fun.
Did it work? Did it work?
It actually did work. Yeah, yeah. It was quite remarkable. The before and after graphs were, and it was sort of in line with her research, and she'd done in sort of in greater numbers of people as well. Yeah, all to do with taking the logical sort of goal-directed part of the brain, sort of at the front here, prefrontal cortex, taking that down a little notch or two just by interrupting it by sending some electrical
Wow.
signals through it. And yeah, yeah, it's quite
That's
remarkable actually. But yes, we can talk about that later. I won't interrupt your flow as you're getting started.
brilliant. And that's a picture of your brain, apparently.
It is my brain. You can tell by the nose. See,
And do you
that's
think
me.
all our brains look like that, or is the female brain different to the male brain?
I think there's disagreement, but I think my understanding of it is that we there are more differences between individuals than there are between male brains and female brains. So and I think there are obviously differences physically to do with hormones and lots of other things.
Sure.
But I think in terms of structure of the brain, I think there's not very much we can say to pull them apart.
Brilliant. And that's your latest book, which is
It
just
is.
out. You've been doing book launches all over, all around the country, I know, and
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed it as well. And your first book is
Mm-hmm.
about to come out when I override my quest to go beyond brain training. And the last slide I'm going to show, which we can talk about later, is the brain waves.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been interested in alpha and theta waves because that's where we get our creative ideas. So I'm going to switch that off now. Back to Caroline. Caroline, tell us a little bit about you and then tell us what neuroscience is in a few words.
Okay, well, I'll start with the neuroscience bit. That's the easiest place to start. So, neuroscience is the study of the brain and the mind. And I think anyone who will tell you that we know how the mind comes from the brain, and actually the brain and body together, would be lying because it's fascinating. To me, that's the beauty of it. So, it's the study of how what happens in the brain and the nervous system in general translates into this experience we have of consciousness and our behavior and our emotions and our thoughts. So how I got into that is I've been a science journalist for about 25 years now, and I just been really drawn to questions of why we are the way we are, why are humans, why we think the way we do, why we act the way we do, and our brains come with these amazing features, consciousness and compassion and altruism and all these amazing things, but they also come with downsides like, problems with focus, like stress and anxiety, sort of proneness to depression. And, there's a lot, sometimes these things are sort of the flip side of the other. And so what fascinates me is trying to find how we can get the best out of the brain and the mind and get around some of the glitches that come as part of the system. So that's what I've been doing. So for a while, I worked as a feature editor at New Scientist magazine, and I still write a lot for them now. And then I went freelance about 15 years ago, and have been writing books and articles yeah, for lots of places really, The Guardian, Telegraph, Times, BBC, whoever will pay me to write and stuff, basically,
Fantastic.
and the three books as well. But the three books really allowed me to be a bit freer because while there's a lot of interesting stuff in journals, in scientific journals. So as a journalist, it's my job to sort of, translate what's coming out in the science into something that everyone can care about and understand. But by the time the research comes out in a journal, it's not old, but the research was done a year ago. And so the really exciting stuff is happening in the lab now. And so what I've done with my books, including being zapped in the head and stuff, I've just sort of gone to the labs and said, okay, what are you working on? Can I have a go? That's where you get to the really sort of cutting edge stuff that's coming up. And the good thing is by the time you get to write the book, it's published. And so, it's all kind of that's how you get the sort of the newer stuff. And it's really good fun.
Fantastic. You've been to some really interesting labs in the States, haven't you? And
Mm.
you told me that you swallowed a pill once to monitor what was going on in your body. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was for inner sense. So inner sense so the book's about interoception, which is a word that's a horrible word. Many people haven't heard of it, but it's sort of a catch-all for the way the brain makes sense of changes and signals from within our own bodies. And so the brain cares a lot about that because it tells you things like, do I need to eat? Am I in danger? Am I in pain? Am I fighting an infection? All these messages coming from the brain and they affect how we think and feel. And so this experiment was to look at gut-brain connections. So there was a pill, it was probably about this big, like think a big sort of cod liver oil pill or something. But there was a little battery and a motor inside it. And you swallow it. So first thing they did is they sort of activated it, started it buzzing. Then I had to swallow it. And then what I had to do, what they were investigating was how different people vary and how sensitive we are to gut sensations. So things like fullness, and emptiness and that kind of thing. And this is something that's important in eating disorders and things like IBS. There's all kinds of things that are important gut-brain interaction wise. And so I had to press a button when I felt this thing vibrating, and they had it on different levels. And in the studies they did, they didn't have time to do it on me, but in their actual studies, they had people with sensors, electrodes on their scalp, so that they could match together what was happening in the stomach with the brain activity. So you can tell that there's a certain network in the brain that responds to these gut sensations. And so in the future, the idea is, can you then use these kind of devices to train people to be more or less sensitive to what's going on in their gut, depending on whether they have a certain, disorder, whether that's a pain-based disorder or whether it's a eating disorder. So yeah, so it was quite a fun thing to do, apart from the fact I nearly sort of choked on the water as I was trying to swallow this massive pill. But it really felt like, if you have your phone in a bag and somebody's phoning you and it's on vibrate, it felt like that, and it was sort of inside. It was kind of interesting.
How did they switch it off and get it out of you? Or shouldn't I ask that?
Well, they didn't switch it off. It has like a certain life. And then you just sort of trust that it comes out. As the researcher said to me, we don't give you a sieve. I'm like, okay, good, because I didn't really
Wow.
want that. But these pills have already been approved in the US for constipation. So people with like chronic constipation, they found that these kind of like vibrating pills can sort of jiggle things along and get things moving. So they're known to be safe to swallow. It wasn't completely out of the bounds of safety. And in America, they're not exactly going to do anything that might make you sue them. So it was all perfectly safe, but a little bit disconcerting.
Okay, let's move to the first book I read, which was Move.
Hmm.
There's a lot of research in there about movement and positivity, and 120 steps a minute
Hmm.
um, is great if you've got your heartbeat at 120 minutes, 120 seconds. Tell me about
It's
that.
yeah. Okay, well there's lots. So the move is basically about the hows and the whys of why moving your body does change the way you think and feel. And it's more, to go further than, oh well, endorphins, woohoo, let's all jump around. So it was looking at sort of the body brain connections. And so the one you're talking about with the 120 steps per minute, that was in a chapter about walking. And so this is kind of interesting research to show that So when you get up on your feet and start moving, so you have to be sort of moving against gravity, so whether it's walking or running, there comes a point, and it's the sweet spot seems to be at about 120 steps per minute, where you get a boost of blood from the bottom of your feet as they hits the floor. And that synchronizes with the heartbeat at about 120 beats per minute. And the researchers found that this increased blood flow to the brain by the most amount. So every time you're up on your feet and moving, you're sort of swooshing the blood around a little bit more. So it's not just the heart pumping; it's also the feet are pumping blood back up. And 120 steps per minute, which is quite a brisk walk. It's not a wander. That was the most reliable boost of blood to the brain, and it was by something like 15 or 20%. Um, so yeah, I thought that was really interesting research. And the other interesting thing about this 120 steps per minute is that when we dance and when we tend to move around, a lot of pop and rock music tends to fall on 120 beats per minute. And so when you're dancing like that and it feels really good, maybe there's a reason why there's this sort of dominant beat in our music, because it just sends loads of blood to the brain and we all feel amazing.
Wow.
Mm,
Okay. While we're talking about breathing,
mm,
6 breaths a minute is called
mm.
resonance breathing. I've tried
Resonance
it. It
breathing.
seems to work for me.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, in fact, I don't know if you have access just to put the slide of my brain back up again.
I do. Yep.
Because that helps to explain why it makes a difference.
Okay, let me just move back.
There she is. So if you see at the top of my nose there, just so it looks almost like I've got fabulous eyelashes. It's very sort of dangly bits there, just down underneath your cursor there, down there. See, it looks like sort of a fringe, if you like, dangling in. So that's so at the top of the nose we have the olfactory bulb, which is a part of the brain, and those little dangly bits that are hanging down, those are the sensory neurons. And so what happens when we breathe in through our nose, the information that's coming in through your nose, it's not just air that comes in. You get a lot of information about the world around you and what's in it. So if there's any smells, any danger, any opportunities for great food or, great people or whatever, that's coming in through your nose. So what researchers have started to think is that as you breathe in through your nose, and brain imaging studies seem to back this up, that it seems to set the rhythm of brain waves from the brain. Because the reason why you have brainwave patterns, what they mean is that different parts of the brain, if they're fluctuating at the same frequency, they can share information. So if something's coming in through your nose, you need to know, is that smell something that's dangerous that I need to know about? And then the areas of the brain involved in memory hop on the same frequency and they share the information. And so there's this idea that breathing through your nose, it sort of acts as a metronome for frequency for your brain. And at 6 breaths per minute, that's also happens to be the best pace for getting the most oxygen into your lungs, and it also stimulates the parasympathetic arm of the vagus nerve for reasons to do with the chest pressure and sensors in the chest. And basically, it's like a one-stop shop to kind of calming everything down. And so, in terms of brain waves, there's some research that has found that it sort of reduces theta, which is the sort of relaxed, sort of drowsy, not really in the room sort of dominant frequency, and sort of increases alpha, which is the more sort of relaxed and ready. So the kind of chilled focus that you want, really. So breathing at sort of 6 breaths per minute. Also in research, it's people report that it's the most comfortable and calming rate of breathing that they're asked to do. And also in sort of when people are reciting the rosary in Latin, or they're praying, or they're chanting, or all these things, they tend to have a side effect of making the breath fall into this pattern of 6 breaths per minute. So there's something about this kind of rate that seems to be a kind of a straight line into a relaxed physiology from your body, and also to the brainwave, sort of relaxed focus. So it's one of the
Mm.
easiest things you can do to kind of just calm down and get sort of back into the zone and give yourself all the oxygen that you need to keep your brain uh, ticking along as it should.
Sounds great. Now, at 3 breaths a minute, which I
Mm,
did managed to do. Uh,
Mm.
you say it changes your state into an altered state.
Yes. So there was some studies that's actually quite fascinating because the studies are done on people often that are having chips inserted into their brain for epilepsy treatments. So when they're undergoing these procedures, the chips go into the brain, the electrodes go into the brain, and they have to wait and do some testing to see what they're going to stimulate and what they're not going to stimulate and all this. So you have these people, and they quite often like to volunteer for experiments as well. So you can record from all these electrodes from these deep in these people's brains. And one of these studies had people breathing through a cannula through their nose, and they slowed it down to 3 breaths per minute equivalent, which is quite hard to do. It's something that expert meditators can do. It's quite hard, and a lot of people in the study just fell asleep because they were just so relaxed, they just drifted off. But the ones who managed to stay awake, they reported going into a sort of altered state of consciousness where they were just sort of they weren't thinking, they were just being. And that was more your sort of your theta brainwave state. And so, you can use breathing through your nose as a sort of shortcut to change the state of the brain, which I think is kind of really fascinating. Especially when you think that, monks have been saying this for thousands of years, and now we've got the science going, well, this is why, because it's all to do with these connections from the nervous system.
Brilliant. While we're on brainwaves, let's
Mm,
just while I've got the slide up there. So gamma
mm.
is where we get our creativity from, is it? But that's fast.
Well, yeah, so the trouble is, it's not quite as simple, because you'll have different networks in the brain, and they may be on different frequencies. So, but it's just when we have these dominant um patterns, they're associated with certain kinds of thinking. And so, yeah, and gamma is more actually problem solving, concentration when you're properly on task. So I think alpha probably and theta are probably more your creativity, because that's when the sort of goal directed bits are sort of offline a little bit, and the brain
Got
is just
some
ping ponging around.
we've got some professional speakers on here. When I'm speaking, 2 hours can go just like that once I'm on top of my material and I've practiced and rehearsed and I've got a good audience. Is
Mm.
that me in gamma at that point?
I wouldn't know, to be honest. The only way to find out would be to kind of do a study of you and lots of other people in that state, and then it's very difficult to say what from the outside without having a load of electrodes on your head. It's kind of very difficult to say,
Yeah,
but
I'd
I
call
guess
it
you'd be in the flow state.
in the flow state. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mm,
So moving forward is obviously a much more positive thing to do than staying where you are. But you talk
hmm.
about movement snacks as well. I like that phrase.
Yeah, well, the moving forward's quite interesting. It's like just in terms of psychology, because there's experiments where people either sort of stood on the spot or moved physically forward, and the moving forward does something weird to our perception of time, where it feels like the future is, we're getting closer to the future, and the past is further behind us, and so it's harder to think negatively when you're physically moving forward through space, which I think is kind of interesting. Um, and what was the other thing? Sorry, Derek, I completely got sidetracked by moving forward through
I,
space.
I think you've got me.
Oh
I
no,
think
I've
you've got
sidetracked
me
you.
as well. So that's fine. But you talked about movement snacks. So
Movement snacks, that was what you
great.
said. Yeah, because I think what I wanted to come out from the book, I didn't want it to be something where what you're saying is, right, everyone, you're already doing, a walk a day, a run a day, you're already going to the gym 3 times a week. You need to do more, 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 more. Like that doesn't seem helpful to me. And what the evidence shows, at least for long-term brain health and cognitive health for long term, the rate of decline correlates not with the amount of exercise you do per se, but with the amount of time you spend sedentary. So the important thing to do is to cut down the sedentary time, not necessarily to, just go between 8 hours a day of sitting at the desk and then go mad at the gym. So movement snacks are about finding ways to get movement into the day. So for example, if I'm unloading the dishwasher, I will squat down and lift up the plates and do that, and then you're getting squats every time. I spend a lot more time sitting on the floor and walking, or if I'm, sorting laundry or whatever, you sit on the floor and you do that. And so every time you sit on the floor, you have to get up, and that counts as a movement snack because you're leg pressing your entire body weight. And so it's just a way of getting more movement into your life sort of by the back door, really. So, just making time every now and again when you get bored, get up, do some movement. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't You can whack the music on in this kitchen and dance around for a bit. It really doesn't matter. But yeah, just cutting down the amount of time sitting still and not moving at all seems to be the key to brain health and cognition in general.
What about going outside and smelling the roses and walking around the garden?
Yeah, well, time in nature is one of those things that's just incredibly good for the brain. And I don't think anyone's really nailed down what it is about it. Is it the color green? Is it the sound of the birds chirping? What is it? Is it the movement that you're doing when you're in nature? And to me, I think rather than wait for the prescription and trying to bring it into the office environment or whatever, yeah, the simplest thing to do is get up and go for regular walks. I think we all sort of learned that during COVID, didn't we? That the before and after was really obvious because you were only allowed out for 1 hour a day. And as you were walking around, like, oh, I do feel better now. Um, so yeah, there's great evidence that spending time in nature, especially when moving, is beneficial, and also because of the access to sunlight as well, does great things for your body clock, which can make you feel a lot better. So yeah, it's a win-win-win.
Couple of things you reminded me of there. Charles Darwin had a walking track round his house in Kent, didn't he? And
Yes.
also, you talked about walking with a client might aid collaboration.
Yes, well, the Charles Darwin thing was about creativity. So he had a house in Kent. It's called Down House. You can visit it. Down without an E, Down House. And he had these. He moved out of London. He come back from all his travels, and I quite like the fact that he had a young family, and he was trying to work, and this young family were outside the door playing, and it was driving him nuts. And I can kind of get on board with that. And so he moved out into the countryside. And one of the first things he did when he got there is he built this quarter-of-a-mile path, which going along and you can walk this path now, you can go along the side of a meadow and then it turns back and goes through a little woodland, which he planted. And he used to go round and round around this path. And apparently he used to pile up stones at the start of the path. And he would say that this is a 3 stone problem or a 4 stone problem. So he'd pile them up, and every time he'd do a turn, he'd knock the top stone off and walk round and sort of like just keep. I like to think of him stroking his beard as he went, walking along. And apparently, the thing I like even more is that his children, apparently, having been taken to the country so they didn't annoy him, used to sneak up and add stones and then run away, giggling, which I think is really lovely. But the kind of acts he knew, and lots of great thinkers of our time have always known that walking and thinking come together. And it's all to do with, as in that slide that you showed of me having electrical sort of current pass through my prefrontal cortex, walking at an easy pace does that naturally. So it turns down activity in the kind of prefrontal cortex of the brain, sort of behind the forehead. And what that does is it sort of all that energy that would normally be keeping us on track with what we're supposed to be doing in our sensible adult lives gets sort of like redistributed. And so the brain sort of ping pongs around. And that's when things that may not normally reach consciousness have more chance of coming through. So that's why our best ideas come when we're out wandering around or, we're just sort of daydreaming, looking out the window. And so Darwin was onto this a long time ago. So yeah, walking and creativity are very much linked, and studies at Stanford University have shown that this spills over for about 20 minutes after you've stopped just walking and sit down. So I always say, if you're going to have a meeting, an ideas meeting, the best thing you can do is either make it after lunchtime and insist everyone goes out, or just go for a quick walking meeting first and then come and let's write all this stuff down. And in terms of the synchronization, that's also because there's huge amounts of research, right from little toddlers all the way up to all the age groups, showing that when people move in synchrony with each other, whether that's dancing, whether it's yoga, whether it's just tapping on a desk, and then you get them to play a game where they can either collaborate or they can compete with each other and stab each other in the back, they're far more likely to collaborate if they've been moving in synchrony before they've played this game. And with toddlers, it's adorable. You can sort of bounce them on your knee for a little while and then put them down, and then you pretend to drop something, And even a little 1-year-old will be more likely to pick it up and give it back to you and help you if you've bounced them in time than if you've been all over the place. So it's kind of, there's something hardwired into our physiology that when we're moving in time with other people, and also this is why every culture around the world has some form of collaborative dancing in their culture, it brings us closer together. And the neuroscience explanation of this is that we know where our body is in space because of our sense of proprioception. So this is like sort of, you have a sense of where your limbs are and where they're moving. You also have your other senses. You can see where your arms are in space. And if you're moving in time with somebody else, their movements that you can see are at the same time as the movements you can feel, and it kind of blurs the boundary of where I begin and you end. And so it makes the side effect of that is it makes us feel closer together. So we care about each other more, we feel more connected. And so one of the researchers I met, he's got this grand plan to get world leaders into a room and get them to do sort of like some kind of movements together to help with collaboration, because there's something about moving together in time that makes us care more about each other and work better together.
So in NLP, we've talked about mirroring people's body language, mirroring their language, mirroring the tone of voice, etc. And then I read about mirror neurons and
Mm.
the neurons in our brain connecting with the other person. Is that woo-woo, or is that
It's not woo-woo. It's just that mirror neurons were a real big hot topic, and everyone was all over them about, I think it was about 20 years ago or so. Um, And yes, so when we sort of match behavior with somebody else, yes, these mirror neurons do fire together. But it's a it's like everything that gets kind of distilled with neuroscience. It's more complicated than that. There's more going on than just my neuron and your neuron doing the same thing. It's sort of yeah, there's a lot more to it. But I think we can take away, the take home message is still the same, that if you mirror somebody's um movements and tone, and then you will feel more connected. So I think you can worry too much about what exactly is behind that, as
okay?
it's
Now,
being worked out.
of course, I've been talking about the left and right brain for about 40 years. And of course,
Yes.
even my Amazon model of the brain has a left and right side of it. So what's the
Well,
latest on that?
yeah, so we do have a left side and a right side of the brain, but what your model doesn't show is that between the left and the right, there is a huge, see that white sort of stuff in the middle, not all of it, but a lot of that. There's a huge bundle of fibers that joins the left and the right. And that's called the corpus callosum. And so basically what it means is whatever happens on the left, the right knows about instantly, and whatever happens on the right, the left knows about. And so the right brain, left brain thing has a sort of kernel of truth in it, in that different sides of the brain, the mirrors, hemispheres on each side, they do sometimes have different specialties. So, one language hemisphere is more to do with meaning, one is more um, to do with emotional content, but the right brain, left brain studies were done on people who'd had this corpus callosum cut. And then in experiments, you could isolate which side of the brain you were presenting information to by putting it over this side, and only the left side of the brain got it, or the other way around. But in everybody else who hasn't had their brain sawn in half, the right and left brain work very much together. And even in studies of highly creative, like jazz musicians, when they're sort of making something up, improvising on the spot, both sides of their brain are very active at the same time. So yeah, sorry, it's a nice, neat thing, but it's not really backed up by what we know by modern neuroscience. And in fact, the way things are going now, it's talking more about, rather than looking at different bits of the brain and what they do, it's looking at the networks that connect all these together, all the connections, and what's going on in what the information is that's being passed along the connections between different brain areas to kind of come out with this whole, which is our experience of the world. So yes, it's a nice idea, but it's never that simple, unfortunately.
Okay, well, here in the UK, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's getting dark by about 5 minutes every day.
I
And
know.
a lot of us get a bit grumpier in the winter. You know what I'm going to ask you now? I read in your book that eating protein makes you less grumpy. Is that going to work?
Oh, well, I mean, again, I think you have to be careful with, that was an interesting finding that was presented at a conference and may have been, published in a journal since then. Um, and it was kind of in a very controlled setting. And so they got people playing these games where they were that they could either collaborate or they could stab each other in the back, and would they get annoyed with each other when they started being nasty, and they gave people different diets and they found a difference. And there's a whole theory to do with you know hunter-gatherer relationships, whereby you were more likely to have to fight for your dinner if you hadn't had protein and you were like malnourished. Of course, you were going to be more aggressive because you were going to be hungry, and that maybe if you had enough to eat, then you'd be fine and you'd all have a nice time together. So I don't know whether it's the same as saying everyone should eat X amount of protein every meal, because otherwise we'd be grumpy. Um, but yeah, we should definitely get as much daylight as possible. That's for sure. And it's not easy, and I hate it too. Yeah, I'm not ready for it yet.
Well, I'm going to ask you, I can't say this word, but I'm going to ask you about mitochondria because you talk about that in your book. What is that?
Mitochondria, yeah. So our cell, so within our cells there are organelles, so they're like miniature organs within the cells, and they specialize in different jobs. And the mitochondria are, well, if anyone's done biology at any level, you would have learned about them as being the powerhouse of the cell. That's what they've always been known. They take uh, the broken down components of the food we eat, and they release it into energy in a chemical form that our cells can use to make proteins and do everything else that the cells need to do. They do a lot more than that, actually. They're becoming known as kind of really very cool bits of kit that talk to each other and move around and very dynamic. But anyway, just don't want to complicate things. But mitochondria, they have a lot to do with how we feel, it turns out. So there's this whole new field now, and a guy called Martin Pickard is sort of spearheading this. So he wanted to know, what does it mean to feel like you have no energy, and why is fatigue and a lack of energy such a feature of pretty much everything that goes wrong with you, whether it's a cold, whether it's aging, whether it's cancer, whatever it is. And so he wanted to know, what does the mitochondria have to do with how you feel? And it turns out a lot. So our mitochondria have this signaling capacity whereby if they're struggling, we feel awful. And isn't there's so it's quite early days in the research, but one of the things that he has found is that if you pile in loads of sugar, too much fuel, too much sugar, or too much fat, if you pile in too much at once, you might think that shoving loads of fuel into a furnace, which is exactly what they are, would increase the energy coming out. But it doesn't work like that, because anyone who has done biology will be traumatized by the stages, the chemical stages in the mitochondria to break down food and release energy. And these tiny little stages have to happen in order. And if you overwhelm them by shoving a load of fuel in at once, it all just gets backed up. And the output of that is less energy, not more. So there's lots of interesting research looking at that. So, for people with mitochondrial diseases, in things like depression and lots of other mental health disorders, there seems to be something going on with the mitochondria in the brain, that they're not functioning properly. And so depression and other mental health conditions, fatigue is and lack of energy and lack of motivation is a major symptom. It's really hard to treat because they don't really know what's going on. So there's lots of really interesting research about looking at health in terms of how do we get our bodies transforming food into energy in ways that make us feel good, rather than the lifestyles we live at the moment feeling pretty awful. I think there's some research suggesting that they seem to be involved in circadian rhythms as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on that we're just finding out about. So yeah, exciting times. I think
I
there's
think we have to invite you back in a year's time to update us with what's going on.
Well, there is a book coming out. So Martin Pickard, who features very heavily in the energy chapter of In a Sense, he's got his own book coming out. I think he said it was 2026. It might be later on, it might be 2027 now, but soon. It's called Energy, and he's a really fascinating guy because he looks at it from the cellular to the sort of psychological, and they've got these. In fact, I spent some time in that when I visited him as well, in a metabolic chamber. So they put people in metabolic chamber, they give them different things to eat, they get them to meditate, they get them doing, they even had someone with a one-man band in there doing stuff. And then they look at how their bodies are using energy and what that has to do with how they're feeling. So there's really exciting stuff going on.
Where's he based in the US?
He's in New York. Yeah, Columbia University in New York. Yeah. So
So you get
they,
some nice trips, don't you, on your research?
yes. Well, I don't get them so much. I take myself on them. The way
Mm.
that books work, they give you a chunk of money and say, off you go, write a book. And you're like, okay, I better. So, I mean, it's my choice to go to these labs and try this stuff out because I just think it brings the whole thing to life and I can understand more because I've done it. And it makes it more, more exciting anyway than just reading stuff in a journal.
I have to congratulate you because that really does come through in your books.
Thank
You
you.
really do bring them to life. Now, Caroline, if there's one question I haven't asked you that everybody else asked you, what would it be?
Oh, goodness me. Hmm. I don't know. That's made my mind go completely blank.
Oh, well, that I've succeeded then. That's
Um,
good.
yeah. What should you ask me? I don't know. Does anyone else want to ask me something that I haven't said?
Well, we'll do that. We'll do
Oh,
that.
sorry.
No, no, we'll do that in a minute
I'll
when I
behave.
switch the
I was just
record.
trying to get off the hook.
Yeah, no, no. Well, that was a bit of an unfair question. We didn't rehearse that in Cafe Nero last
We
week.
did not. We did
No, I
not.
cheated there. I'm sorry.
You could
Can
ask
I
me what my
just?
favorite kind of way of moving is, and I'd say that uh, all the ways. So my rather than being somebody who commits to one particular thing. So I did yoga today. I do street dance. I used to do trapeze. I walk my dog. Me and my friends go out on our bikes when I can persuade them. Um, yeah, so I just try and make sure that there's something that keeps me up and about and moving because otherwise I can't do anything very well, really.
I
So
bet you
yeah.
can. Well, you can certainly write very well, and you can speak very well. And congratulations on that TEDx talk that I
Oh
looked.
gosh, that was a while ago now. That's from the archives, that one, yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
how do people get in touch with you if they want you to speak at their conference? And how do they get your book?
Well, if they want to get in touch with me, I'm on Instagram, Caroline Williams _science. I have a website which is carolinewilliams.net. And I'm on LinkedIn and we're connected, aren't we, Derek? So you can probably find me through Derek. I wouldn't know there's quite a few Caroline Williamses, but if you put Caroline Williams science journalist, you hopefully will find me.
I
Um,
found you, Caroline. I
you
found
found
you.
me, you found me, and I'm more than happy to speak. I like speaking almost as much as I like writing. So um
And you were asked to speak in San Francisco, weren't you?
mhm.
That didn't quite work out. Well,
Hasn't yet. I'm
Patricia
hoping that
Tripp's on here, and she's living in San Francisco at the moment, so we'll take it
yes,
offline.
I'm hoping I can still make that happen, and I'm still hoping that I can make it happen in Taiwan as well. That's something that's in the mix as well. So yeah, happy. I'll go anywhere. I'll go anywhere. Like traveling.
Can I ask members of Monday Night Live to give Caroline the vote of thanks in the normal way? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for coming. I like that, Patricia.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd stay on for a little while, that'd be terrific.
Sure, absolutely.